Hello there and welcome to Where's Wilmington. I'm Lisa Capalla. You know, doesn't it seem like every other day you turn on your television and there's a true crime drama on? Well, today, if you are into true crime drama, which who really isn't, right? Sure. We have got the truest of the true crime drama survivors and writers, Dana Owen. He has written a book called Shotgunned, which is right here. And it is about his long ordeal of the wounded cop seeking justice. Wow, what a mouthful. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, for those who don't know about you and your story, can you take us back to where this all began? And obviously the title Shotgun gives you a little taste of what actually occurred.
A little hint,
but
right, yeah.
Tell us about that. And I know that there are some local folks in Wilmington who are actually involved with your story too.
Absolutely. Story starts on June 16th, 1975, which was my youngest daughter's 4th birthday. I was living in North Reading at the time, and I was partnered with a gentleman named Bob Power, who was a Wilmington resident. Went to work that night on a Monday. I was driving in my 1972 Dodge Dart, listening to my AM/FM radio, and they were playing the song Monday, Monday by the Mamas and the Papas. And thinking back after all this happened, the line, Monday, Monday, you can't trust this day, just stuck in my head. So we left the birthday party. There was a North Reading cop's wife that was a clown at the party for us. Had a nice day. Quiet Monday night. Went to work at 4 o'clock. Had a couple of minor calls, and then we went to dinner at Bickford's Pancake House in Medford. As we were coming out, we got a general radio call of a tractor-trailer truck had been hijacked by 2 white males on the Congress Street on-ramp to the expressway, Lessing, heading northbound towards Route 93.
Okay, and that's when all the fun begins,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Now, take us back also to the way communications were done then, because most of us watching true crime drama on television now, some of it's not quite accurate, but at that time, the communications, from what I understand, having read the book, between the dispatch and you and Bob Power in the car, and also your fellow officers, was not what the high-tech communication we have today, and that might have been part of why what happened to you happened.
It was part of the issue. They had one channel, they had Channel 1 and Channel 2. Channel 1 was headquarters. So the cruisers, there were a lot of cruisers out that night, could hear the headquarters talking, but they couldn't hear the cruiser responding unless you changed physically over to Channel 2.
Right.
So we set up on Route 93 near Mystic Avenue. We saw a tractor-trailer with 2 white males go by, and you didn't see 2 men in a tractor-trailer back then, so we started to follow them. My partner Bob was calling it in. We're following a suspect hijacked truck, with that hijacked truck, and all headquarters were saying was 10-4. So no one was paying attention to what we were doing.
Right.
We were kind of on our own, and this went on for quite a period of time, and then I finally decided to give them what I call a drive-by. And when I went by the passenger side of the truck, I looked up at the gentleman on the truck. He turned his head and covered his face quickly, and we knew we had him.
Right. And actually, reading the book, it's written exactly like Dana is speaking to you. There's a lot of really interesting detail you put into the book as well. I thought I knew something about the law, but reading what you wrote and really picturing all of the areas, a lot of places that we know, the Hilltop Steakhouse is mentioned here, yes. Bickford's Pancake House. It feels really like we know you from reading the book. And so for a first-time author, I'm really surprised at that. But you had a little help with the book, right?
I did. When I first started this, 5 years ago actually, I contacted a gentleman named Ron Golubin, who retired from Channel 5. And right. Ron did one of his very first on-camera interviews when he interviewed myself and my wife in Winchester Hospital, where I was taken to. I contacted him, we went out to coffee. He said, "You're a great storyteller, but I'm not sure you can put this on paper." I told him I wanted to write the book. So I emailed him the first chapter, which I really haven't changed much. And his response was, "Wow," with 3 exclamation points.
Excellent. And the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history.
How did you remember all the details? Obviously, you're a detective. That's why. And when I was reading the book, that's what I was thinking. The detail, the level of detail, especially you were shot. We didn't get to that in the story we were just telling. Twice, actually.
Right. Twice.
Yes.
Yeah, twice on the head.
Yes, and I'm surprised all of the detail, the vivid detail you have about everything that happened. Now, time slowed down for you when you got shot?
Yeah, when I got shot the second time, everything went into slow motion, like they say in movies and everything, and I had all the time in the world to make decisions.
Right.
And It was a very traumatic event, and it's just ingrained in my brain.
I was going to say that I had a car accident, and I talked to the doctor about that. I said it felt like it was going to take forever before I hit the tree. And he said it's your body slowing down, preparing for the impact of what's to come. So that's pretty rare that you would remember that. And it's also rare that your body would go into that mode, too. So I think that's probably what saved your life.
I think so. And when I was laying on the street, and I'd been shot twice in the head, I felt I was losing consciousness. And my wife, being a nurse at the time, I knew shock could kill, and I knew I was in deep shock. I was basically paralyzed, and I was losing my vision and my hearing. And the last thing I wanted to do was lose consciousness.
And let's face it, think of the medical skills we had in those days. It's miraculous that anyone would survive 2 gunshots, even with today's medical care. But at that time, that's really miraculous. One of the things that struck me, too, was that you didn't want to die on the day of your daughter's birthday.
No, that just was running through my mind. I'm thinking her birthday for the rest of her life will be her father dying, and I absolutely didn't want to do that.
So,
and,
the power of your will to do
my
that.
father died at age 32, and he was a platoon commander in the Normandy invasion, and my mother had been a widow all those years, and I did not want my wife to be a widow, so I fought to stay alive. I consciously fought to stay alive.
And I'm very glad you did that.
Thank you.
So tell us what's the difference between an MDC cop and a regular cop?
The MDC was started in 1893 as the Metropolitan Park Police. To do a very quick story, as the roads were built, it became a larger police department. There was 650 people at the time, and we patrolled 56 towns in Massachusetts and most of Greater Boston. Mostly highway patrol. We were mostly highway patrol and checked on MDC facilities. We did a similar job to the Mass State Police, but we had more facilities.
Okay, but there was a time when you were a mounted police officer as well.
I was a mounted police officer for about 4 years. Yeah.
That's neat.
It was.
You enjoyed that?
Yeah, my daughter's a horse trainer and a horse show judge, and we were into that, and I had an opportunity to go in that unit, and I had a good time doing that.
Excellent. So after the fateful night where you were shot, and you're lying there deciding you're going to go forward, what happens when you start to feel better? Big question.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. They let me go a little bit early. I was in Winchester Hospital because my wife was a nurse, and it suddenly dawned on me the good guys in the white hats didn't win this scenario. These guys escaped that night. There were 4 guys on the getaway car, and they escaped that night, and started to really bother me that we hadn't caught them. And I started working on the case on my own once U.S. Postal Inspectors became involved. And I technically wasn't supposed to be working on the case, but I was tailing some people in Somerville and their local gin mill hangouts and reporting back to the
What also was
inspectors.
interesting, too, is their crime with you was linked to other crimes, too. It was all kind of interesting how you pieced together. They had been involved in the robbery at the Hilltop Steakhouse,
Well, that was after.
Right?
They robbed 4 banks before my incident, and I happened to follow them a few nights before they hit the Hilltop Steakhouse, and they shot and killed a Wells Fargo guard. I followed them what was called a time run, and they were a bad bunch. They were
unbelievable.
A bad bunch.
And there was also some speculation that they might be involved with the famous Winter Hill Gang.
Yes, that was.
You found out that wasn't so.
Right. To do the book, we were 99% sure. We named them the 10 Hills Gang because they based their operations out of a cafe on Mystic Avenue called the 10 Hills Cafe, to separate them from the Winter Hill Gang. When I worked with Ron Goldman, he said, why don't you try to get hold of Howie Winter, the former head of the Winter Hill Gang?
Yeah, excuse me?
I said, sure, how do I do that?
Yeah, just call him up,
I managed to do that through another contact, and in 2010, I took Mr. Winter out to lunch with Ron Goldman, another individual, and asked him those questions, and he said, no, they weren't Winter Hill Gang.
What was that like, talking to him?
It was
Did it feel
fascinating.
different? I mean,
well, I was
he
no
just
longer a
seems like
cop. I was
but
retired.
you're always a cop. Come on.
Well,
That's who you are.
He was a very articulate, interesting, friendly gentleman.
Interesting. Yeah, because you would think a sociopath of that magnitude, when
He
you're
wasn't
sitting that
what I
close to
expected.
someone.
I ended up liking the gentleman, to be honest with
well,
you. He was very
they
honest.
say criminals have charm. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So after you survived and you got back onto the police force, then you were able to actually work on the case. And the book really takes off from, a lot in the beginning is about the details of what happened to you. But the part that's really fascinating is all the years it took you to bring those 4 criminals to justice.
Right.
Yeah. So you ended up actually being assigned to work on your own case.
Yeah, I'd worked on the case for a lot of years, and we were running out of time. And I worked with, there were a couple of our detectives who were assigned to the case. They removed a couple that really weren't doing anything. And where it was a federal postal crime, and they had a lot more money than us to investigate the case, they were working on it. But From time to time, they would have to drop it because they had other cases to do. And I was very friendly with two gentlemen named William O'Leary and Fred Ricca, and I asked them to meet me for lunch about 6 months before the statute was going to run. There was a 5-year statute of limitations on a federal crime. And they saw to it that I was assigned to them on special assignment, and I worked directly on the case.
And I won't give away all of the book, but I think my favorite part was the part where you were able to interview one of the guys who was part of the shooting.
Yeah, one of the shooters I was.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, talk about shaking in your boots.
That was a real challenge, because I had to interview him, and no matter what he said, I couldn't lose my temper or show any kind of emotion, and I was lucky. It went very well. It went very well. He ended up testifying for us. Yeah, I was very lucky.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting piece of the book later on when you meet up with him again later. I won't spoil it for folks.
Thank you.
So where can we pick up the book? And we're going to take our midpoint break in a second, but those of you who have already been watching, where can we pick up the book if we'd like to?
I actually have a website, www.shotgunned.com. You can order it directly from me. Around here, you can go to Kaz Hallmark in North Reading and get the book.
Okay.
You can actually go to, if you're an Amazon fan, it's on Amazon, and it's in some bookstores in Somerville, and little by little it's going to be all around Greater Boston.
And you have a Facebook page too.
Yes, I do.
So if people can't find it and they want to
if you go to my Facebook page, Shotgunned, and you recognize me after you've seen the show, and over to the left is the www.shotgun.com. It's a very simple website that Athena Yuganian set up for me. She did all the work.
All right, we're going to take our midpoint break here. When we come back, I want to talk about why write the book and why you were obsessed, is what I would call it, with finding these guys. It's an easy question, but harder to answer, yeah.
More than likely.
Okay, so we'll be back with more right after this. Stay right there. Hello and welcome back to Where's Wilmington. We are talking about true crime drama. Ooh, exciting. This is the book that the gentleman next to me here, Dana Owen, wrote. It is called Shotgunned, and it is about the true life story of you surviving 2 shotgun wounds to the head.
Correct.
I mean, it sounds incredible, and it really is. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about your story and what you had gone through, and I was going to ask you why. Why did you write the book? But more importantly, let's back up. Why did you feel it was so important to solve this crime yourself?
I wanted someone else to do it, but the way it was going...
I don't believe that.
Well, like I said, the thing that stuck in my mind, watching the Cowboys and Indians when I was a kid, was the good guys in the white hats are supposed to win, and we didn't. They got away that night, and...
But that's not the only measure.
Well,
see, I saw your struggle with that in the book, and that's what I'm alluding to. It was very fascinating for me to read about your struggle with that. Is this an obsession? Should I not be doing it? And I was glad they assigned you to your own case, because I thought it would have taken away from any other case you would have been working on. I don't know that you could have done both things at the same time. So I was glad that they assigned you to your case. So you
I had the advantage. I was not technically a detective. I was brought in as an investigator in plain clothes working on this case on loan to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service.
Right.
And the only case I had to work on at that time was the mail case. Later on, I had to do some undercover narcotics, which I hated, and a few other things to stay in there, but this was the main thing. And I just couldn't get it out of my head. I just couldn't get it out of my head.
And there's a chapter in here about your wife, too. And as I was reading the book, it's like you were reading my mind, because I kept thinking, how is Sandy feeling about all of this, you know? And that was a really fascinating point of view to add. And I think it bears, noting to know that she was going through a lot at this same time, too. And it was fascinating to get her take on how all of this was.
That was actually Ron Golubin's idea. Ron was my mentor in this. I asked him if he would co-write it with me, and he said, no, you need to do this yourself. I'll be your mentor, I'll help you, but you need to do this. And he said, did anybody ever ask your wife what it was like for her? And I said, I don't think so. And he asked her, and he said, can you ask Sandy if she'll write a paragraph or maybe a chapter? And I did, and a few years ago, and she said, nobody ever asked me. And she sat down on a steno pad longhand in one writing, and I haven't changed a word in a chapter. A chapter brought me to tears because she thought I got killed.
Right. Well, of course. I mean, that's what every wife, I would imagine, who's married to someone either in the military or in the police line of work would be worried, firemen too. Which brings me to why write the book? Many people survive tragedy. What makes you so special?
It's a funny way I got to write the book. A friend of mine named Bobby Martini, his father had worked for Howie Winter in the Winter Hill Gang, kind of. And he was shot by the same guy that shot me. And
Really?
Bobby Martini wrote a book called Citizen Somerville a few years ago. And in 2008, I think it was, Bobby interviewed me for the book. And he said, Dana, I want to use your name in the book. You know, you got shot by the same guy that shot my dad. Bobby ended up being an MDC policeman, as a matter of fact. And I was still paranoid from working undercover on this for so long. I said, well, you can mention the cop that got shot, but don't mention my name, which in retrospect, I should have let him use my name because it would have been good publicity. But,
right, but you didn't know that then.
No, I didn't. And I thought, you know, I've got a good story. I'm retired now. After I retired, I did 27 years on the Mass MDC and then the state police and took my pension. I did 27 years. Then I worked for 2 major gun companies for 13 years. And then I pretty much out-retired in 2008. This took me 5 years of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, writing till 11 a.m. about 7 days a week for 5 years.
Do you think you needed to do it?
Yeah.
That's what I felt when I read it. That not so much that it was a demon, maybe, because they think somewhere along the line, and I know you suffered from PTSD from it too. And when I was reading the book, I went, "That's PTSD," and then you said, "Yes, that's what I had." I really felt like I knew you from reading it. It was a nice feeling to read that.
But a lot of people tell me that when they read the book, it was like me telling them the story personally.
Right.
I'm
that's how it
very,
felt.
very happy with that.
And the details were really nice. But to go through all of that and then to take all this time out of your life to put these guys away, and you got all of them but one, and that's because he died.
Yes.
Right?
Well, one of them was actually acquitted, but that's, you read in the book, that was, plus he got shot in a gangland hit and...
Karma.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you feel like if you didn't succeed that you wouldn't be happy in life if you didn't succeed at getting them?
I think if we didn't,
that you needed that vindication?
I needed to win that battle.
Yeah. And I recall in the book someone said something to you unkind right after the incident about an award you received, and that's really what fueled you.
That certainly stimulated me to
there was
move
someone
forward.
who will use the term gentleman who said, well, the guys got away, why do you deserve any kind of award because of what happened?
Exactly.
But isn't that interesting how instead of making you weak, that actually fueled you to
It made me
on.
more focused on catching these guys. It made me more determined
It's
to
definitely
do it.
a Lemon's Lemonade kind of story,
I agree.
for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about self-publishing and how now you've written the book and you've had everybody look at it and all of that. What happens next to get it to become what it is we see here?
When I started this, I started with Ron Golub, and I have to give Ron credit. It's very hard not to write like you're doing a police incident report.
Right.
When cops write reports that are going to be used in court, you say little or nothing.
Right, the facts, just the facts, ma'am. Right.
So Ron, exactly. So Ron would say, you know, you're telling me it's a funny joke, but you're not telling me the joke. That's the one that finally got through my thick skull. I understood what he meant. You need to tell the people your feelings.
Right.
You need to put them there. And that's what we worked on.
Right.
So,
because you have somewhat of a dry personality, but I can see in the book that you really were opening up a lot more.
Tremendously.
And probably from doing all the public speaking, you've been all over the town. You've got a few more public speaking engagements to do. I would imagine that helps you to relax a little bit.
It did. And when I was on the police
process.
department, I was an instructor, firearms instructor, and I talked to, on the state police, I would talk to 200 recruits. And when I worked for the gun companies, I was an instructor from time to time, so I'm fairly used to public speaking.
Right, except this is about you.
Yeah, I did a talk today to the Rotary, the Wilmington Rotary,
Right.
and I relived the story for them, and it's impossible to tell the story without showing emotion.
Well, of
I
course.
can't do it now.
I mean, my goodness, that's probably one of the most traumatic experiences anybody could survive, I would say.
I thought after 39 years that would go away, but it hasn't gone away.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing.
I mean, do you ever wonder how it changed your life? Do you ever think sometimes how different your life would have been if this didn't happen? And you can't really know that, can you?
I did the what ifs for a while and I gave up on the what ifs.
Well, it's dangerous to stay in that place.
Exactly.
Yeah, not healthy. Yeah. So what's next for you?
Well, we've got somebody who's actually interested in doing a screenplay on the book.
Nice.
To do this, I talked to numerous people. I worked with a self-publisher. Where it's true crime, we decided I hired an intellectual property lawyer.
Okay.
And I started my own company called Shotgun LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. So we actually published the book ourselves, myself with the help from Ron Goldman and Athena Yeganian.
Right.
And she has her own company, and she just is superb at tense and flow and catching mistakes.
And she also had been involved with the police force, too,
She
so
had.
she understood that side of the coin
Yeah,
as well.
she's worked with cops for 30-something years, yeah, so she understands
Excellent.
cops.
So will there be a different book? Will you write something with a fictitious background, or are you just going to stick to the true crime?
Right now, I'm going to stick with this, and I don't have the strength right now to write another book.
You don't know that.
My wife has been very tolerant. When I
all
go
right,
into work on this,
all right.
she would call it, "Are you still lost in space?" when I was sitting on typing every morning.
Right. Do you feel like it wrote itself? Or do you
It took on its own.
Did you do an outline?
It took
What
on
was
its
your
own
process?
life. No,
Yeah.
I started doing it chapter by chapter. I actually wrote the ending probably halfway through the book, which Ron suggested I do. It just took on a life of its own.
Right.
She did some editing and removed some things, and which it was. Cops can tell stories, can tell war stories, but I needed to stay on topic.
Right, and I mean, there's some interesting stuff in there too about the bureaucracy that exists in your organization, if you can still say you're part of them. And that was fascinating to me too, and I actually spoke to some local police who told me, yes, that bureaucracy that you experienced where you couldn't get information traded between organization to organization, that still exists, and that blows my mind.
That still exists. I'm not sure that will ever go away. You hear it talked about or mentioned in things like the Boston bombing, the Marathon bombing, and even the World Trade Center. For whatever reason, agencies aren't really good at sharing information. I think it's
I can understand sometimes when there's an issue with something might be compromised, but that's interesting even in the book too. So even if you're not into the story of your life, Dana, if they don't know you, just getting a behind the velvet ropes look at how things were done and how they are done, really fascinating. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank
I
you.
hope you
Appreciate
write
it.
something else. I'd like to read something else
We'll
from
see.
you. Anything final you'd like to tell everybody before we scoot?
No, I've really enjoyed it. I think anybody that's read the book, I've gotten great reviews, some great reviews on Amazon. They say I couldn't put it down. I had a gentleman say, I've got to tell you, it's the first book I've read cover to cover since I graduated from college 40 years ago.
I feel the same way. It was
I'm very proud of
it was a great summer read. I mean, I took it to the beach with me.
Excellent.
I had it done in 2 settings. So, and I wish you great success with the book and also with your public speaking tour. I think that's great.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking to a lot of libraries and doing a lot of readings and so forth. And I'm not a great reader, so I do storytelling when I do.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you made it through, and thank you for writing this book. And you also, one of the reasons why you wrote this book, too, is you wanted other police officers who've been through this kind of ordeal to not be forgotten.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that. I see
your
policemen that are shot, and within days, you're just totally forgotten. And policemen that are killed, and there's a saying on our job, we give great funerals. We'll bring in 5,000 cops, but it's forgotten about a few days later.
And so you really
you
dedicated this partly to them as well,
exactly.
and people who have survived.
Yeah, to my family and to officers that have survived shootings.
Excellent.
Exactly.
Well, we appreciate you doing that. So thank you for watching today. If you want to go out and pick up Dana's book right here, it's called Shotgun, right? And you can get it at Amazon and many other places. Be a great gift for the season coming up. We want to thank you for watching Where's Wilmington and remind you that the next time somebody asks you where's Wilmington, you tell them right here and right here on WCTV. Thanks for watching.